So this is Monster Hack here, going over our PM2 speed control shield that we did for the Bots IQ project this past year. The board was developed and designed by BDG, and it was manufactured by our friends down at SMG Global Circuits in Washington, PA, who did a great job with this. And what we're going to do is piece this together one by one, walk you through the soldering steps, and our friend Warrior Poet's going to take you through the steps. So what we have here is an H-bridge circuit with these IC motor control drivers, and a few other things I'd like to point out. We'll show you this little hack that we had to pull through here that we didn't take into account when developing this board. So what happened was, during competition, a lot of the robots were pulling so much current through their weapon that it was dropping the voltage on the battery coming in, and it would reset the electronics. So at a later point in time, we soldered a voltage drop circuit in here that fed back into the Arduino, and we're able to control the weapon. As the voltage drops, we can pulse the weapon so it keeps the battery from dropping too low to reset the electronics. So I'll pass this off over to Warrior Poet and let you guys get started.
First up, we're going to attach the 10K resistors to spots R1 through R8. Just take a 10K resistor, just bend it right at the body of the resistor there, put those legs facing downward, and then you're able to slide it right through the PCB. I'm going to flip it on over and just apply some solder right to the joint. And you're going to do that for spots R1 to R8. After you've attached all your resistors, you should have this nice forest of leads. Just go ahead and clip those free. Once you're finished, you should have nice looking back to the board, and all of the resistors R1 through R8 attached on the front. Next up, we're going to drop in the 470 ohm resistors in the spots R9 through R12. I'm actually going to use a different soldering iron. You may have spotted earlier that my joint actually was completely empty. It was a really bad soldering iron. So here we go. So R9 through R12, I'm going to drop them all in and solder them all in one go. Remember to clip away the leads once you have them soldered in place. And now you have spots R9 through R12. Next up, we'll drop in the 510 ohm resistors into spots R13 through R16. When you're finished up, go ahead and clip the leads. Now we're ready to put in the 200 ohm resistors in spots R17, R18, and R19. Let's go ahead and clip away the leads. And that's all of our first set of resistors. Now we're going to go ahead and attach a switch to S1. This guy's a little fun to push through. You just got to wiggle it in place for a little while. Once you get it through, it holds itself in there pretty good. Flip it on over and apply the solder. This guy's so short, there really isn't anything to clip. You can try if you want to, but you really don't have to worry about it. Next up, we're going to attach a diode to spot D1. You want to make sure that this white stripe here matches the pattern on the board. When you go to bend the leads on this, you want to get close to the body, but not quite up against the body. So I'm just going to use my fingernail, just a tiny bit of spacing, but just a little bit. You can see what I'm doing here. Just going to bend just the tiniest bit away from the housing of the actual diode here, and then just going to do again from the other side. Now I'm close to bending all the way to the body of the diode. I'm a little bit apart. And if I did this just right, see how that lined up perfectly? So slide all the way down. So that slid all the way down for me. All I used was just my thumbnail. I'm going to flip that over and apply some solder. Once you finish soldering, you can clip the leads. This will be a little bit harder to clip since it's a much thicker lead. Now we're going to attach some ceramic capacitors. Polarity doesn't matter with these, so it doesn't matter which direction you put it in. We're going to attach these to spots C1 through C4, so 0.47 microfarad capacitor. Once you're finished, go ahead and clip the leads. Now we have this 22 microfarad capacitor. Again, it's ceramic, so its polarity doesn't matter. It's going to go into spot C6 over here. It's a little tricky to get it in there because the actual leads here point a little tightly into the middle. So we're going to actually just pull them out just a tiny bit. Give yourself just a little bit of room. Now I've got this spaced out just a bit more. Go ahead and slide that into spot C6. Flip it on over and apply the solder. If you're like me, you may have had to fiddle with it just a bit just so that the leads would actually be even on the other side, so it's not slanted to one side or the other. Go ahead and clip the tiny little bit of leads you have here. They're a little too long to leave unclipped. And there we go. This temperature sensor is going to land right on TS1 over here. You'll notice that this actually is much narrower than the spots on the board. So you want to bend the two legs on the outside, just a tiny bit out to the sides. So we're just going to take the one on one side here. We're just going to bring them out just a tiny bit. See, I just brought them out just a little bit. We can leave the middle one alone. Just need to just bring the outside edges just a little bit out, kind of fan this out just a tiny bit. All right, so that should actually give me the ability to push it right on in. Make sure that the actual rounded edge matches the pattern on the board. Kind of wiggle it on down just a bit. And right about there seems low enough. I don't want to go so far that I strain the actual connection to the body of the temperature sensor. So right about there is plenty low. I'm just going to flip it on over and apply some solder. Go Go ahead and clip those leads. And you're all set. Next up, we're going to attach these little headers here. There's actually 3 sets of these 3-pin headers. And we're actually going to cheat here. We're going to use these terminal blocks to help sort of elevate the board as we go to attach these. So go ahead and follow along with what I'm about to do to make a little bit of a trick here. So I'm going to flip this over first. And I just want to show you that we're going to attach the one here, this J5 one, so we're going to put the headers in. The other ones are actually in J6 and J7. You're going to do the same trick for all of them. So I'm going to flip this over, and there's my J5 spot right there. Okay, and I want to actually balance this guy on these 2 terminal blocks, just to sort of elevate things up. I'm going to slide these headers in from underneath. Now the short side is what we're soldering, so the long side, you're pointing towards the table. Okay, so see I've got that all balanced here. Before you proceed to add solder, you want to look from the side and make sure that those headers are actually standing upright, that you don't have them at a slant. You want them perfectly perpendicular to the board. So I know you can't see it, but I know that I need to move my board just a little bit closer to myself to try to get it nice and perpendicular. And again, I'm checking from the side. You'll have to look at the side of yours. You want those headers perpendicular to the board. I think I got the tiniest bit more. I'm going to bump it. There we go. All right. So again, check it from the side. I know you can't see it on the video, but trust me, you'll want to do that extra work. So now I'll lift this up. You can see that those headers are nice and perpendicular to the board. Go ahead and attach J6 and J7 the same way. Here you can see the other 2 strips of header here. Just make sure you have those attached before you move on to the LEDs. So you're going to put an LED into spots LED 1, 2, and 3. And the way you want to do this, you want to look for the flat side of that LED. It's actually easier to feel than it is to see, so just run your fingers around the rim of the LED. You'll notice one side is flat. Make sure that flat side matches up with the drawing on the board. So as you can see, the flat side is on the top here towards the words LED 1. I'm going to just slide this on through. Gotta wiggle that down a little bit, and you might have a little bit still sticking up, and that's okay. You don't want to go too far down because then you'll put too much strain on the connection to the body of the LED. So I'm going to stop right there and flip this on over. So next we're going to actually solder this LED in place. We're going to kind of go against any kind of soldering practice you've ever seen before, because one of the hard parts about a tricolor LED is that it's really hard to solder when the leads are this close together. So to kind of make this a little bit easier and less likely for you to actually end up connecting 2 of the leads together, we're going to kind of cheat. We're going to apply a soldering iron well above the actual PCB, kind of drip the solder down. So as you can see, I've got my soldering iron a little bit above the actual pad, and I'm going to get the solder kind of moving down here, and I'm just going to kind of just run that solder on down. See how I cheated there? See how I made that connection down at the bottom? You want to cheat just like that. So again, I'm holding the soldering iron above the actual connection to the PCB, and I'm kind of just dragging the solder down. Perfect. See, I just make that cheat work for you. As you can see, we're not connecting any of the leads together because we're dragging the solder down, whereas if we applied at the actual base, we would end up bridging 2 of these leads together. And there we go. So none of those actually connect to any of the others. You want yours to look just like that. Do that for all 3 LEDs. So normally when I go to clip leads, I just clip them all haphazardly, but in this case, you want to clip them one by one. It might sound a little strange, but what happens is sometimes when you clip and you're actually cutting through some solder, you kind of morph the shape of that solder, and you could accidentally actually make it touch one of the other leads. So clip them one at a time. And you can see that none of the solder touches any other one of the leads. Next up, we're going to solder in the terminal blocks. You want to make sure that this side is the side you have facing the outside of the board, and this side is what's going to be on the inside edge. There's 4 spots. They're marked TB 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm actually going to do just 2 of them right now, but you're going to attach all 4. So I'm putting one on the right-hand side and one on the left-hand side so I can balance them as I flip this over. That way the heights match. Put one on each side, flip it on over, solder these in place. And again, you're going to do all 4. It's going to take a little longer to heat up, so just be prepared to have to let the soldering iron sit there a little longer than the other spots have. All right, look closely here at how this is set up. You can actually see that the entire pad is covered. There's a lot of solder on this connection here. And you really have to let it heat up a lot if you want it to look like this. This is how you want it to look. It's covering the entire pad. There's a lot of solder on this connection. So you can see I have all 4 of those terminal blocks connected. Next up, we're going to put in the motor drivers themselves. They fit in these 4 spots here. And you want the 3 little legs in the front facing towards the inside. And I'm actually going to put them in here. I'm going to put just 2 in. You're going to do all 4. I'm just going to do 2 and then 2 later. Flip it on over. And then solder them in place. The other 2 are going to go in the same way. Just slide them in and go ahead and solder those in place. Go ahead and clip these guys. This actually is a pretty strong lead, so these might fire out whenever you go to clip them. So I recommend that you clip them pointing away from you. Alright, so we're going to drop in this voltage regulator in spot U5. Goes right on in here. What's nice is that it's almost the same height as all these other guys here, so when we flip this over, it should lay nice and flat. Try to make sure those pins are actually standing straight upright, kind of perpendicular to the board. That way you know that it's not standing at an angle on the other side of the board. Go ahead and clip those leads when you're ready. And there you go. This next capacitor goes in spot C5, and this is actually an electrolytic capacitor, so polarity does matter. This longer leg is the positive, and it's conveniently marked with a little plus sign on the board. So slide that in place and solder it on down. It's a little taller than all these other guys here, so it will stand sort of at a slant slightly as you go to solder it in place. Just try to keep it as perpendicular to the board as possible. And when you're ready, go ahead and clip the leads. So now we're going to solder in the headers that actually make it so this board mounts on top of the Arduino Mega. And to make sure that they line up correctly, it's good practice to put the headers into the Arduino and then solder it to the board. That way you don't end up with headers that are sticking out at odd angles that don't fit when you press it on top of the Arduino. So we have 4 pieces of header, 3 of which are 8 pins, and they're going to go 1 in here. This one you're going to actually feed going from spot 8 and up. You're going to leave the last 2 empty. We have this little guy over here, and then this one's a 6-pin, and you're going to start it actually so that you have the spot right down at the bottom going on up. So you take this and you stack it right on top. It will take a little bit of fun to actually get it to line up. So now you can see that the pins came through, and now we're ready to solder. So we're going to solder just this first row right here. You're going to do all 4 parts of the headers. But I'm just going to walk you through this first one. You just want to be real touch and go with this, and just get it just so that it connects to the pad, and just work right down the line. Go ahead and finish out the other 3 sections of headers, and you'll be all set with the header pins. So now you have everything soldered in place that's actually labeled on the board. This next step is a little bit of a hack. Here's a 1K ohm resistor, and I've actually bent it a little bit after the body of the resistor and clipped away the excess here. I'm actually going to hook this in. There's a little tiny spot here on the board. It's right here. It's this inside hole, right where it's the one closest to this white line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just hook it right on in. Look where I have that hooked. All right, and then I'm going to lay the rest of it over pin 5, which actually I'm going to go ahead and solder it in place to pin 5, and then we're going to solder the other half there down to the board. So go ahead and get your soldering iron ready, and you're going to solder this body here to pin 5. Now that I have it soldered to pin 5, I'm going to go ahead and get that inside spot there. So part 2 for this hack, we take a 10K ohm resistor and we put another little bend in it and clip away the excess so I can just hook it right on in here. And again, I'm picking the hole that's closest towards the inside here, right next to that white line. And then I want to actually put this other side so it connects to the resistor we put in place earlier. So I'm going to find out where that's at, and I'm going to put a little bit of a bend here, give myself sort of an X. Now I'm making sure this X appears well away from the actual pin that we soldered to. So see where I have that X? And that's going to be pretty key to getting this in place. I'm going to go ahead and grab my soldering iron and try to get that X established to hold this guy in place. So now that I got that X pretty much locked together in place there, I'm going to go ahead and get the other end of this resistor. This guy can be a little tough. You might have to leave the soldering iron there for a long while to get a connection. I'm actually having a hard time with it, so I'm going to flip it over and get it from the other side. So I ended up with some excess solder there, but I did get the connection in place, and that's all that matters. Once you have that hack complete, go ahead and get this excess of this resistor clipped away here. And make sure that if you have any excess to clip away on the bottom that you do that as well. So now all the soldered connections have been established. We actually can look here and see some joints did better than others, and there's a little bit of some shiny wet spots on here. And this is going to happen, and don't be surprised if you have this with your first experience soldering. And an easy way to clean this up is actually just take a little alcohol wipe. So it's just like what you see whenever you go to the doctors and they give you a shot. So they always wipe you down with an alcohol wipe. And I just take this little guy here and I just rub around those connections that look a little wet. And this can be because of the flux in the solder, or it can be just because you had maybe a little too much water from your sponge on the tip of your soldering iron. So all I'm doing is just going around anywhere I see a little bit of that build up and just wiping it away with an alcohol wipe. Easy to do. So now you're ready for the last step. You're going to attach these heat sinks, and you want to make sure that this little dot, you see how you have the hole here and there's a little dot. It's kind of tricky to spot unless I get it in the right lighting here. That little dot should be at the top. So that hole's going to line up actually with this hole here. So we're going to put the hole on the outside edge. We're going to slide this right on down. And you're going to want to kind of hold your board up a little bit as you push this down. It makes it a little easier so you don't strain the piece itself. And you can see those holes line right up. So go ahead and attach all 4 of those. And there you go. So one of the big things you always want to do when you finish a project is you want to go and check for any errors you might have made. And I actually have one to show you. It's very easy to forget. You're looking underneath, things like that, looking for stuff you forgot to clip, or any kinds of mistakes, any joints that accidentally bridge soldered that you need to maybe do some desoldering to get that fixed. And the mistake that I made was actually I forgot to clip this lead right here. And if I just leave this floating in no man's land, this actually could cause a bit of a problem. So I've pulled this up. This is from the hack that we did at the end there. I've pulled this up. It's where I had the 2 resistors cross. I'm just clipping away that extra little bit of that lead. And if you followed the video verbatim, you probably made that same mistake. So it's always good to look for any mistakes. And again, look for any accidental bridge solders, things like that. Look for any piece that maybe you thought you soldered, and then you realize when you look at it, hey, I didn't solder that at all. So again, error checking is a great last step.